In California, if I'm not mistaken, if it's labeled California wine, then the grapes have to be 100% grown and produced in California. But in Texas, I think it's only 85%.
Currently, it's 75% in Texas.
Okay, and I read as of I think October of last year, somebody, one of the Texas winemakers or wineries, proposed legislation to the state requiring that it be 100%, so it has more of an, I don't know, authenticity, I think is the word they used.
Yes, that was actually, so we put that on the ballot, I want to say 3 years ago now, maybe 2. My timeline's a little goofy. But yeah, Chris was actually at the forefront. Chris Brundrett of William Chris Vineyards, who I used to work for, was at the forefront of that. And it's still going through the system. It has not been fully approved because there's a lot of wineries that feel differently. So we're still battling that, but currently it still stands at 75% Texas grapes to be on the label.
Why are some Texas wineries opposed to a legal mandate requiring 100% of the grapes be from Texas if it's labeled Texas wine?
Just from sitting in and listening to the conversations that happen, I would say that there's a couple Texas wineries that use California grapes because it's less expensive to do. The fruit from Texas can be very expensive and also unpredictable because of our weather.
That's right. The weather in California is more consistent, but why are Texas grapes more expensive? You'd think because they're grown here, they don't have to be shipped anywhere.
A couple reasons. Because we're not as big of an industry yet, that drives up the price. The second would be our weather. We have hail, our extreme conditions, and the different soils. And then thirdly, about 80% of all Texas's fruit currently is grown around the Lubbock area. So to give you perspective around the hill country where a lot of the business and industry happens to come and visit, that's a 6.5 hour drive. So to get the grapes from all the way up in the Texas High Plains, AVA, which is where 80% of Texas fruit is grown, all the way down to the hill country where it's made, can be very expensive.
So I would guess if there is going to be some legislation that passes, they'd have to work out something so the Texas wineries didn't take a financial hit. Do you approach selling Texas wine different than California wine?
Oh, definitely.
We represent Texas and California wine. So what approach would you use when trying to promote wines to customers? How would your approach differ when you're selling California wines to when you're selling Texas wine?
The biggest thing I will say is to not always tell people that it's Texas before they've tried it. I've taken Texas wines to Illinois, New York, Louisiana, a little bit in California, and all over Texas. I've done the demoing by myself, and I will definitely say that people have this notion about Texas wines. They either think it's going to be super sweet or not up to par to what they normally drink. And this is facing from the consumer. So in learning that, I have learned to not tell them what they're going to drink. I ask them if they would like a red, a white, or rosé, and then pour it for them, wait to see their reaction, and then say, hey, this is what it is, Cabernet, Tempranillo, whatever it may be. And I say, guess what? It's from Texas. And their face, everybody's face is the same. They're completely shocked. And like I said, even in Texas, there's a lot of people who were born and raised here drinking the sweet wines. And that's all they know Texas wines to be, unfortunately. So there's a lot of education that needs to go behind it. But that would be my biggest advice, is to not always tell them what they're about to drink.
That's great advice. That goes against everything I teach my staff when promoting wine, but I think it makes sense. And I never thought of it until you said it. But, well, I mean, take California Chardonnay. It's, there's only a percentage that go overboard with the butter and oak. But all California Chardonnays tend to get lumped into that same stigma. That's why our goal when we do demos, for example, is not only to pour, but also to teach. Because with every person who we teach and educate, well, that's redundant. With every person we educate, we change one person's mind, and we've kind of killed that stigma for them. And then they'll probably tell a friend. So, one sip at a time.
Yes, exactly. And the varietals too that grow in Texas generally are not things that people have heard of, so they're also afraid of that. And that's why I just start very general. Do you drink red, white, or rosé? Pour it for them. Then you get into the description of the varietal and then where it's from and all of that.
Yeah, I've always found when you relate it to something they may know, like when we sell, say, Barbera, I always tell them, look, I'll say it's a red wine from Italy, this is a grape, blah, blah, blah. And then I'll say, do you like Pinot Noir? Yeah, I do. Okay, well then if you like Pinot Noir, chances are you're going to like this.
Yes.
It doesn't taste the same, but it has some similar characteristics. Then they can relate it to something.
Definitely.
Like if I recommend a band to you you've never heard before, and I say, well, do you like Led Zeppelin? Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, they're kind of like Led Zeppelin. So anyways, yes. Okay. And then for California, I assume your approach would be, because it's California, you probably don't have that stigma attached to, say, or do you? I don't know.
Yeah, sometimes, like you hit the nail on the head when you said Cabernet and Chardonnay. Everybody's always asking for that, and most people have that stereotype in their head that Chardonnay is going to be oaky buttery, or Cabernet is going to be a big oak fruit bomb. Because, for example, if you taste a cab from Texas, it's not going to be as big of a grape and taste as it would be from California, just because of our climate affects the grape a little differently, and so does the soil. So I go with analogies, or I tend to look at the customer themselves and kind of get a feel for what they like, their body language, and assess what they might like, or what they may be interested in, or how to even get them over at the table. I comment on something in their cart if you're doing a demo in a grocery store, or if you're doing it at a tasting at a restaurant. I make sure to look at what they have going on in front of them, or what they're wearing, just something that I can relate to them. And generally, asking them a question ropes them in a good way, because I'm like, oh, okay, you care about me, you're interested, you're taking note, you're going to listen to what I have to say, and that opens the doors for them and that trust to start building for you to be able to pour whatever you're going to pour for them.
So you start with a question as opposed to, hey, do you want to try some wine?
Most of the time, yeah. And one last piece of advice would be to not talk a lot. Choose like 2 or 3 facts about the wine that will grab people's interest, and let them talk and let them ask questions.
That's a good point. Is your thought process behind that because a lot of people, especially if you're in a store offering samples like Specs or Whole Foods or wherever, is your mentality behind that attention spans are not always going to be the best?
Yes, exactly. Or people are always running around. They don't have time for anything. Most people will say that, at least. So you want to get in, get out. You're not there to sell them wine. And when you talk a lot, it feels like it's that. At least if I'm looking from a consumer standpoint. Just tell me what you have and let me get on with my day. If I like it, I'll ask more questions. If not, I'm going to head out. I don't know. I always try and put myself in the consumer's shoes and think of it that way, because that's who you're selling to.
Yeah, funny you say that. If I see people are kind of like in a hurry or something, I usually don't even go into much detail about the wine, because I can tell they don't really want to hear it, and so they don't, And then if it's me, I'm going to get irritated if somebody starts giving me this whole spiel. I'm like, sorry, look, man, I got to go get spaghetti or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. If the goal is to sell wine, and I really don't use the word sell a lot because I feel like it's so brash, but if the goal is to sell wine, do it however you need to do it, and do it quickly. Get the wine in their mouth. That's how you're going to sell the wine. So however you can get to that as quickly as you can and as factually as you can.
With that said, is there any general ways the Texas climate affects grapes that the California climate does not, or vice versa?
Yeah. I'd say overall, Texas has more of a medium body rather than a fuller body. And again, this is general. This is not speaking about every single wine that comes out. So red wines tend to be more of a medium body and higher in acidity. And the acid is that goes for both whites, rosés, and reds, and that is because of our heat. We don't get a lot of cool nights in Texas. It's at least warm at night, especially in the Lubbock area in the Texas High Plains where a lot of our fruit is grown in the state. It's hotter than hell during the day, not a lot of wind, and at night it drops down a little bit, but generally it's still warm. So you're getting a lot of good acid. Depending on the soil, that I think affects the boldness a little more. But we don't have a lot of really super fertile soil. Our soils are typically sand. You'll get some clay in the hill country, but very rarely. Silt, riverbed, rocky. So you're going to have some concentrated flavors, but generally the boldness comes from the oak or some additives to the wine here in Texas.
Typically in hotter climates, wines have less acidity. That seems to be the general rule around the world, but Texas has a hotter climate than California, although the winters do get colder. So, but you say the Texas grapes tend to have more acidity, so I kind of wonder maybe it's because of the winters here, because it definitely gets much colder here in the winters than it does in California. So do you think that could be it?
Definitely. For sure. I think that's a big piece of it as well.
Okay. Yeah, because I know that California, generally speaking, doesn't have the level of heat and humidity that we do. It's a bit more temperate. Well, actually, California is more of a Mediterranean climate.
Yep.
And we have it's either Arctic Circle sometimes or Mordor. So.
Yeah, we tend to have the extremes.
Okay.